The message arrived on a Wednesday morning. "Hey Diane, could you take the kids again this year? We're leaving for Orlando on the 10th. I'll drop them off on the 9th. Thanks." No, please. No, can you? Just thanks, like it was already decided. Diane stared at the text for a long time, coffee cooling in her hand. For a moment, she imagined typing the usual yes, preparing herself mentally for another week of microwaving chicken nuggets, managing tantrums, and sleeping with one ear open. But something in her stopped. She didn't reply. Not that day, not the next. Instead, she booked 3 nights at a quiet, adults-only hotel an hour away. Nothing fancy, but with a pool and a small spa. It wasn't even the cost that made her hesitate. It was the feeling, unfamiliar but intoxicating, of choosing herself. On Friday, she finally wrote back. "I'm sorry, Amanda. I won't be available that week. I've made plans." The reply came instantly. "Plans? What plans? With who? You knew we were going. You always help. This is so selfish." Then, a second text. "You're seriously going to abandon your family? You're a traitor, Diane." Diane stared at the word. Traitor? For protecting her time? She didn't respond, but that word took on a strange life. By Sunday, Amanda's husband, a man who barely said 10 words to Diane at holidays, texted her too. "Amanda's really hurt. We counted on you. This isn't like you. What's going on?" Then her cousin, Elaine, called. "Amanda says you're going through something. Is everything okay?" Diane didn't realize it yet, but something had shifted. Not just in her, but in the family around her. And soon, people would begin asking questions. And some of those questions would uncover things Diane had never told anyone. The hotel room was simple but clean. Beige walls, heavy curtains, a soft bed that hadn't yet known crumbs or sticky fingers. Diane stood at the window, watching the breeze bend the trees in the parking lot. She had no one to cook for, no cartoons blaring, no one shouting "Aunt Di" from the bathroom. It should have felt freeing, but she felt a strange ache in her chest, not regret, something older. That first night, she tried to enjoy herself. She ordered a glass of wine and sat alone in the dining room. A woman nearby chatted with her teenage daughter. Another table was filled with a group of older women, laughing, relaxed. Diane didn't feel lonely, but she did feel separate. On her second day, she took a walk through the garden trail behind the hotel. Her phone buzzed. Amanda again. "You're punishing me, and the kids. I hope you're proud." Then a message from cousin Elaine. "Amanda told me you've been depressed. Is that true? Should I call someone?" Diane stopped walking. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Depressed? Was that the story now? She opened Facebook and searched Amanda's name. There it was, a status from yesterday. "Prayers for my sister Diane. She's going through a tough time emotionally. Family means we don't abandon each other, even when it's hard." The comments were worse. "Stay strong, Amanda. She'll come back to herself." So sad when people fall apart. Fall apart? Diane stared at the screen, stunned. She hadn't fallen apart. She had just stepped away, quietly, respectfully, and yet her absence had become something else entirely. A narrative Amanda was controlling. But why? That night, Diane dreamed of her mother, not as she was before she passed, but as she had been when Diane was 12. Young, tired, and already leaning on Diane to handle things. The dream stirred something in Diane, a memory she thought she'd buried, how early the caretaking had really started. And it made her wonder, was Amanda leaning on her because she needed help? Or because she'd learned that guilt was the fastest way to control someone? The phone rang the next morning. Diane almost didn't answer, but saw the caller ID. Bethany Yates. An old friend. They hadn't spoken in over a year. "Diane," Bethany began gently, "I know I'm probably the last person you expected to hear from." Diane sat up straighter in bed. "No, what's going on?" Bethany hesitated. "Amanda called me. Said you were in a bad place. Said you might be isolating because of depression or, her words, a breakdown." Diane's hand gripped the comforter. "She asked if I'd reach out. She made it sound like you were unstable." Diane's voice cracked. "Did you believe her?" "No." Bethany said firmly. But I did think, why would Amanda say that? That's not the Diane I knew. That's not who you are. Diane thanked her, her voice thin. After the call ended, she sat in silence for nearly an hour. A part of her wanted to cry, not from sadness, but from something sharper, humiliation. Amanda wasn't just venting. She was building a version of Diane that made her refusal seem dangerous, illogical, inexcusable. A version where Amanda was the concerned sister and Diane was the unstable one abandoning her family. It was clever, really. Frighteningly clever. Later that day, Diane took a notebook from her purse and began listing every time Amanda had crossed a line, borrowing money without repaying it, forgetting to mention she'd volunteered Diane for something, making jokes at Diane's expense in front of family. As the list grew, Diane saw a pattern. Amanda had never needed Diane to help. She needed Diane to exist in a role, the responsible one, the loyal one, the one who never left. It hit her then. Her absence wasn't inconvenient. It was threatening. Amanda didn't want Diane well. She wanted her available. And now, for the first time in their lives, Diane wasn't. Diane returned home on a Wednesday afternoon. The hotel room was cleared, but her thoughts were messier than when she'd arrived. She entered her quiet apartment, placed her small suitcase by the door, and stood still, as if the walls themselves were waiting to ask, "Are you back to normal now?" She didn't answer. She walked into the kitchen and opened a drawer, not for utensils, but to pull out a faded folder. Inside were letters, cards, little handwritten notes from over the years. Most were from Amanda. Birthday cards with one-sentence messages, notes asking for favors, a few thank yous. One in particular caught Diane's eye. It was from 3 years ago. Amanda had asked Diane to take care of her children for a weekend, last minute as usual, and Diane had canceled a date to do it. The card read, "You're the best. Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you. Love you. P.S. We owe you one." Diane smiled bitterly. She had never been owed. Amanda always said that, but never paid back a thing. That evening, the phone rang. It was their Aunt Cheryl, their late mother's younger sister. Diane answered with caution. "I'm calling because I just don't know what's going on anymore," Cheryl said, her voice lowered. "Amanda's been telling everyone you're not well. She said you left town without explanation, that you've been acting strangely since last Christmas." Diane closed her eyes. "None of that is true. I didn't think so. But here's the thing. She said she found a letter from your doctor, something about antidepressants. She said you'd hidden it in your drawer." Diane went cold. There had been a letter, from 4 years ago. One prescription, after a rough winter when she was grieving their mother. It was private. She'd never told anyone. How would she have found that? Diane asked quietly. Aunt Cheryl was silent. Diane felt like the air had left the room. Amanda had gone through her things, her drawers, her personal mail. Now it wasn't just manipulation. It was intrusion, violation. It wasn't about babysitting anymore. It was about control. Diane stood in front of her bedroom cabinet. Her fingers hesitated on the drawer handle. She hadn't touched the folder in years, not since the cold, gray January after their mother died. She opened it carefully. The letter was still there, tucked inside a larger envelope. Unopened. Untouched. So Amanda had lied. Or worse, snooped and copied it. Diane's skin prickled. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with her notebook. Her handwriting had grown sharper over the last few days. She wrote down the names of everyone Amanda had turned against her so far. Elaine, Bethany, their cousin Marie. She marked those who had reached out versus those who had gone silent. It looked less like a journal and more like evidence. The next morning, she made a decision. She called Aunt Cheryl again. "I need to ask you something difficult," Diane said. "If Amanda calls you again, can you let me know what she says? Not to gossip. Just, I need to understand how far she's going." Cheryl paused. "Of course. I already thought something wasn't right. I love Amanda, but this feels mean-spirited and sneaky." Diane nodded. "It is." She hung up and exhaled slowly. For once, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like someone preparing for something bigger than a family spat. Later that day, Diane stopped by the pharmacy. She hadn't filled a prescription in months, but she walked past the aisle slowly, as if looking for something else. Something forgotten. At the counter, she asked, "Can I get a copy of my medication history for the last 5 years?" The young woman behind the desk printed it out. Diane looked it over. One prescription, filled once, 4 years ago. No refills, no follow-ups. Clean. Truth in black and white. She folded it, placed it in a fresh manila folder, and wrote one word on the tab: documentation. She wasn't planning a fight, but she was done being unprepared. The next morning, Diane did something she hadn't done in years. She called her brother Tom. Tom was 2 years older than her, lived 2 states away, and had always been distant. Not cruel, just detached. After their mother's death, he'd quietly disappeared from most family events, citing work and travel. Still, she dialed. "Diane?" His voice was cautious. "Hi, Tom. I know it's been a while." "It has," he admitted. "Everything okay?" She exhaled. "Not really." She gave him the shortened version, Amanda's recent demands, her refusal, the backlash. Then she paused before saying, "She told people I was unstable. She's making it personal." Tom was quiet for a beat too long. Finally, "She's done this before." Diane's eyes widened. "What?" "She told Marie once that you'd lost your job because of burnout. I asked her directly, and she brushed it off. Said she was just worried about you." "I never lost my job," Diane said flatly. "I know that now, but it explains some of the distance. I didn't know what to believe." Diane's heart sank. Amanda had been chipping away at her reputation for years, not just weeks. "Why didn't you say anything?" Diane asked, quieter now. "I thought it was between you two. Honestly, I didn't think it mattered. But it does now, doesn't it?" "Yes," Diane said. "It really does." After the call, she sat for a long time. The isolation she'd felt over the years, family members pulling back, invitations becoming rare, it wasn't imagined. It had been designed, and Amanda had done it without ever raising her voice. Diane picked up her pen and added a new heading in her notebook. "Pattern of sabotage. Long term under it," she wrote. "Marie. False story re. Job. Bethany. Breakdown. Aunt Cheryl. Doctor letter. Elaine. Emotional instability." Each line was like a tile in a larger mosaic, a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Diane realized something else. Amanda wasn't careless. She was calculated. And if Amanda had done all this just to keep Diane under her thumb, what else had she meddled in? On Saturday morning, Diane received an email from her workplace's HR department. Subject: Request for employment verification, external inquiry. Her stomach tightened. She opened it. "A woman named Amanda Carter contacted our office yesterday, requesting confirmation of your job title and status. The request seemed informal, but we wanted to notify you in case it was unauthorized or concerning." Diane's breath caught. Amanda had called her job? She stared at the screen. What was Amanda looking for now? Evidence that Diane had been demoted? Or maybe proof that she'd taken leave? To fit the story of a breakdown? But there was nothing to find. Diane's record was spotless. Still, the fact that Amanda had tried, that she'd crossed into Diane's professional life, made Diane's hands shake. She clicked reply and calmly thanked HR for the heads up. Then she printed the email, added it to her folder, and wrote a new header in her notebook. Boundary violations. External Amanda wasn't stopping. She was expanding. That evening, Diane sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The late summer air had cooled. Her thoughts were sharp now, less tangled. She called Tom again. "She contacted my job," Diane said. "Tried to dig up something." Tom sighed heavily. "She's spiraling." "No, she's escalating," Diane said. "She's trying to corner me, make me look unstable or incapable, professionally now. And if I don't act, she'll keep going." Tom was silent. Then, "So what are you going to do?" Diane didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug. "I think I need to speak, clearly, publicly, before she rewrites the whole story." She paused. "I'm not just defending myself anymore. I'm reclaiming who I am." Diane didn't rush her next step. She spent the weekend organizing her notes, printing screenshots, writing dates and names in a clean timeline. Every time Amanda had crossed a boundary, every time she'd lied, every person she had influenced, it wasn't to be dramatic, it was to be clear. By Monday morning, Diane had booked a table for 6 at a quiet restaurant outside town. She invited Tom, Aunt Cheryl, Cousin Marie, Bethany, and Elaine. The people Amanda had whispered to most. All had accepted the invitation, if a bit hesitantly. The table was silent when Diane arrived. She greeted each person with calm, steady warmth. No bitterness. Just focus. Once the food was ordered, Diane gently placed her folder on the table. "I know this is unusual," she began, "but I wanted to clear something up." She met each of their eyes. For the past several months, and maybe even years, Amanda has told stories about me that simply aren't true. That I'm unstable, unreliable, even unwell. I didn't realize how far it had gone until recently. Marie looked uncomfortable. Elaine looked down. Bethany's face was pale. "I'm not here to start a family war. I'm here because I believe the truth matters, and I can't let someone else keep writing my story." She opened the folder. Printed messages, emails, dates, a copy of her pharmacy records, the employment verification attempt. She didn't throw accusations. She simply showed facts. "I've been silent for years, too long, and maybe my silence allowed a lie to grow. But this is who I really am, and I'm not going to be erased by anyone, not even my sister." By the end of the meal, no one argued. Bethany apologized. Marie admitted Amanda had made her uneasy more than once. Aunt Cheryl squeezed Diane's hand. When Diane walked to her car, she didn't feel victorious. She felt clean. The silence had ended. Amanda texted 2 days later. "Heard about your little dinner party. Real classy. So now you're rallying people against me?" Diane stared at the message, heart steady. She didn't reply immediately. She didn't feel the rush to defend herself anymore. Instead, she picked up the phone and called her. Amanda answered quickly. "So you're talking behind my back now?" "No," Diane said plainly. "I spoke the truth, out loud. Finally." Silence. "I've let you tell my story for years," Diane continued. "And I stayed quiet because I thought it was easier, but it wasn't. It just made you louder." Amanda scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "You went through my drawers. You contacted my job. You told people I was unstable." Amanda's voice hardened. "You are unstable. You abandoned your family." "I said no, Amanda," Diane interrupted, voice firm. "I said no once, and it exposed everything you've built on my silence." "You don't understand how much I've had to carry," Amanda started. "No," Diane cut in again. "You don't understand how much I've carried. Since Mom died. Since before she died." Amanda didn't answer. "You needed me to stay in one place. The helpful, quiet sister. And when I stepped out of that role, you panicked. You weren't protecting the family. You were protecting control." The silence between them now was no longer bitter. It was hollow, empty. "You can say whatever you want about me, Amanda, but I'm done living by your script. I know who I am now, and more importantly, so does everyone else." Amanda hung up without a word. Diane sat for a moment, the line buzzing in her ear, then placed the phone down gently. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, just the quiet end of something that had lived in the shadows for too long. 2 weeks later, Diane received a large white envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside were drawings, crayon-sketched pictures of superheroes and stick figures. A note written in Amanda's eldest child's handwriting read, "I miss you, Aunt Di. Mommy says you're mad at us, but I still love you." Diane closed her eyes. She wasn't angry at the children. She had always loved them deeply. They were never the issue. But now she saw how Amanda used them too, how she'd turned their innocence into tools for guilt. Diane didn't respond. Instead, she packed the envelope gently in a drawer. One day, maybe, when they were older, she'd tell them her side. When they could understand. The following Sunday, Diane went to brunch with Bethany and Marie, the first time they'd invited her in years. It wasn't awkward, just Different. Lighter. They talked about work, about vacations, about life. And no one mentioned Amanda. Later that week, Tom called to say he was coming to visit. "I want to be closer to the family again," he said. The real family. For the first time in a long time, Diane didn't feel like she was surviving her family. She was choosing it. She started therapy, not because she was broken, but because she finally had the space to ask herself, "What do I want?" She began reading again. She went to a museum. She joined a local group for women navigating complicated family dynamics. It wasn't dramatic, just small things, but each one hers. Amanda never called again. Word got around that she was giving Diane space. No apologies, no acknowledgments. But Diane didn't need them. She had truth, she had peace, and she had her life back.